Star Wars 7x7 episode 3018. Today, the first of a two-part conversation with Saskia Maarleveld and Marc Thompson, who play Leia and Han, respectively, in the Princess and the Scoundrel audiobook adaptation. Punch it! Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod and this is Star Wars 7x7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy, and thank you so much for joining me for it. So just as a quick refresher, The Princess and the Scoundrel is a novel by Beth Revis that came out a couple of months ago. It details the wedding and honeymoon of Princess Leia Organa and Han Solo. The book is written in alternating chapters. One chapter is from Leia's perspective, the next chapter is from Han's perspective, etc., etc. And so to do the audiobook adaptation for this, Penguin Random House Audio did something a little bit unusual. They brought in two narrators. Sometimes it's one and sometimes it's a full cast, but it's not usually two narrators. And they decided to follow the convention of the book and have one person narrate Leia's chapters and one person narrate Han's chapters, and then for the final chapter to have the two of them together. Well, those two folks are Saskia Maarleveld, who does the Leia chapters, and Marc Thompson, who does the Han chapters. So over the course of this conversation, which I will be splitting into two parts for today and tomorrow, we're going to talk about how they found out that they were being invited to do this particular audiobook presentation, what they thought about Beth's novel, how they prepared for Han and Leia, and of course, the other characters that they would portray, but their process basically. Also, what they think is particularly important for a portrayal of Han and Leia, and I actually flipped this question on them. So I asked Saskia to talk about Han portrayals and Marc to talk about Leia portrayals for that one. We also talked about the recording process, which was a bit unusual as well, and also the recording process for that final chapter. So without further ado, let's dive into part one of the conversation with Saskia Maarleveld and Marc Thompson. Saskia Maarleveld, Marc Thompson, thank you so much for joining me on Star Wars 7x7. How are you both today?
Hey, I'm doing
Good,
great.
thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Oh, absolutely. I'm so glad to get to talk to the both of you. And you two are the spectacular narrators of Beth Revis's novel, The Princess and the Scoundrel. And it's a rather unique way of doing the audiobook narration, at least for Star Wars storytelling. I mean, we've had situations where it's just one narrator and we've had situations where it's a full cast, but to have two people playing the very specific roles of Han and Leia and then doing the voices for their characters is quite an unusual thing. So I think I'd like to start with just the high level of how you found out about the project. Like, how did you get the word that you were being asked to do it and that you found out that this was the way that it was going to happen? And Saskia, I'd like to start with you on that one, if I may.
Sure. So obviously Marc has done many more of these than I have, but I've done a few, so I'm kind of in the family, so to speak. So occasionally you do get an email about one, and it's super exciting. So that was kind of what happened with this one, where got the email from Penguin Random House, and it was not too much of a quick turnaround, so it was going to happen pretty quickly. And it was just very exciting to hear that I'd be working with Marc, who I've worked with on multicasts, but never this closely, and to do Leia again, which was my first Star Wars book, was a Leia POV. So it was exciting to know that I was coming back to that.
Awesome. And how about you, Marc?
Yeah, pretty similar. Like I got the email, and then they said that Saskia is going to do it as well, and I was like, oh, cool. So like, I guess at first I thought I'll do the male characters and she'll do the female characters, and then they're like, no, you're going to do alternate chapters, and I was like, oh, really? Like, that's interesting. And then when I got the script, I saw that Beth had written it that way, like it alternates from Han's perspective to Leia's perspective, and I was really intrigued. And I was like, oh, that's a really cool way to kind of tell the story and kind of examine the story. And so I was super excited to get to do it that way, and I'm hearing that people are liking it, so it's good.
Yeah, definitely. And so, since you've opened the door to, Beth's novel, I'd love to hear more about your overall impressions of the novel from both of you. And if you can share a favorite moment or two from the novel and why you enjoyed it. And Mark, I'll stick with you for this one for starting.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I really liked it. Like, I think like Beth did such an amazing job of writing Han and Leia, and like, you know, like kind of just any time that they're talking with each other or bickering with each other, you know, it's like it felt very much like the Empire Strikes Back hallway scene on Hoth to me, and like, you know, like or you know, kind of them professing their love to each other on Endor and Return of the Jedi. Like, it felt like a very natural continuation. I feel like she really got into their mindset and totally like nailed the characterizations of Han and Leia. So that was super fun and super special. And then yeah, like I think I don't know if I should talk about this now or later, but like I actually got to go to the Halcyon. Like, I had been planning this for like years before I even got, you know, the book. And then it just timed out that like I got to narrate this like 2 weeks before I got to go on the Halcyon. So then,
oh wow,
like I was
Cool.
definitely into it as a Star Wars fan and just as a Han and Leia fan. But then there were like moments where I was like, oh, I'm gonna see that thing, and I'm gonna, oh my gosh, and you know, and there was this I don't know if the book's been out for a little bit, but there's a mild spoiler of a thing that Han does when he's playing a sabacc game in engineering. And there's something he does in engineering. And when I got to go on the Halcyon, I asked one of the crew members about it. And I was trying to speak in code so I wouldn't give anything away. And I was like, is it true that Han and Leia had their honeymoon here? And they were like, mm-hmm. And I was like, is it true that Han may have done something in this room? And they're like, mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, wow. And then they were like, you know, would you like a hint? And they kind of pointed me in the right direction, and I was able to find it. And it was like it was like, oh, wow, it's so cool. You know, and it was like, so it was kind of neat having like the inside scoop and kind of being able to, you know, find little Easter eggs on the ship because of things that happen in the book. But you know, the book is a fun adventure and a fun romance, whether or not you go to the Halcyon or not. But it was extra special for me, and kind of it got me super excited about this trip that I had been like, you know, counting down for about 2 or 3 years. So it was pretty fun. It was pretty cool.
That is amazing. Thank you for sharing that too, Mark. That's awesome. Saskia, what about you? What was your overall impression of the novel, and maybe a favorite moment or two that you'd like to share?
Yeah. So also, like, what timing for that trip?
I know, it was amazing.
Amazing. That's like, you're like, okay, that's worth waiting a couple of years just so I could do it now.
Yeah.
So for me, what I liked about this was that it was a little different from all the other Star Wars books that I've done, in the way that it was so much more intimate in a large part of it, because of the romance and because of all the really beautiful scenes that she wrote between Han and Leia. And so I liked that blend of like more intimate romance with all the adventure and action that we're used to. And at least most of the Star Wars books that I've done have been like, you know, mostly very fast paced, a lot of cool character stuff too. But I really enjoyed the intimacy of this, and it was fun to do, especially knowing that I was like doing it with Mark, and that it was going to be kind of a collaborative effort to bring that to life. But yeah, I loved that kind of difference. It just made it like that extra bit different from the other books that I've done. Yeah. And I also love the action. I kind of live for the action. So I also loved once they got on the Halcyon and took off, and it was just kind of like a great big adventure, as it always is. But yeah, no, it's blended my two favorite things, action and romance.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And so, you know, the both of you have mentioned the opportunity to record with each other. So I will ask about the recording process itself, because of course, you know, in this world, things are a little bit different now than they have been over the past couple of years. So maybe it was done differently, but how did you guys do this? You were alternating chapters, but were you in the recording studio together doing this at the same time, or were you recording your sessions separately from each other? And did you have to, or want to, or need to listen to each other's performances as you were going along for your own work? And I'll start with you, Saskia.
So we recorded the majority of the book separately, with Kevin Thompson, who's the director, and Tony was my engineer. I think he was also your engineer.
Oh yeah.
Mark. And so we had like the same team, which was nice because they can keep us, and Kevin does all the books, so they can keep us grounded and give us a little. Mark recorded first, I think, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So he was able to Kevin was able to keep me in the same world, on the same page. But also I've heard Mark doing Han before, and so that was really helpful just to reference back of I know how he records, and I know how he narrates, and kind of keeping that in my mind. So we were separate for the majority, and then for the final chapter, we were in the same studio but in different rooms, which wasn't I don't think it was even a COVID thing. I think it was just a practical thing of getting the best audio and without having to do a whole crazy setup of having us in the same booth. It was a kind of last minute decision to do that, the chapter that way. So I think it was kind of okay, Mark can come in here, Saskia's in here. Okay, we got these 2 rooms open, link them up, let's go and do it. So it was nice. We got to give each other a hug and take a picture and act together over the microphone, but sadly we were not in the same physical space for the recording.
Gotcha.
Yeah. All that is true. I can confirm.
Mm-hmm.
Were you able to see each other as you were performing that last scene, or that last chapter?
No, unfortunately, yeah. It was like Saskia was saying, that it was kind of they weren't sure if they were going to do that or not. They were kind of going back and forth with the production people, could we do this? Because there was some slight adaptation that had to happen in order for us to kind of, do the dialogue, but very slight, but so you have to get permission for all that. And then they have to make sure everybody's cool with it. So it was kind of when they got the final green light, it was in the middle of recording. So then it was Mark, can you come in? And so we had to do it that way. So I wish it would have been fun to kind of be in a bigger booth and kind of play off of each other, and gotten to do that a couple times on some of the multicast stuff. But next time. But yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but it still worked out great. And it just, it just adds so much to be able to play off of each other and to kind of, respond to each other. It's a lot more fun, but it's definitely a lot more, it gives a lot more work to do to the back end of things. So I understand why you can't always do that, but it's fun when we get to.
It's funny. It also
go ahead.
It also
please.
I feel like it adds, it pushes you as a performer, and just kind of deepens your own understanding of what you're doing. I kind of wish we'd done it at the beginning.
Yeah.
Because I feel like it got me in the groove in a really cool way.
Yeah.
Just being oh yeah, and then to go from that to then being by myself, I probably would have been able to keep. I mean, it was still fine, but it would have been cool to. I felt like it got me in a good groove, hearing Mark, really feeling in the world of Star Wars.
Yeah, I agree, because there's so many nuances that you bring to Leia that I wouldn't necessarily have thought to have put in there. So then it inspires you, and it's oh right, that is how Leia would have said that. And then so it's it's really cool.
I think, I have listened to that last chapter actually multiple times, because I just so enjoy the back and forth, and it really does feel like the two of you are right there, as if you were in the same space, in the same physical space, having this discussion. And there's a dynamism to that final chapter that is just really special. So I enjoyed the heck out of it, and kudos to Kevin and Tony and the rest of the team as well for their help with that too.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah.
So since your chapters are both from the point of view of these specific two characters, I'd love to know, and you've also done these characters before, is there any particular preparation that you do to create as close to an authentic performance as possible for these two iconic characters? And Saskia, I'd love to start with you talking about your performance of Leia for that.
So yeah, I was lucky that the first Star Wars book I did was Leia as a younger girl or young woman, and so I had that background that I did a lot of research for that, and watched a lot and just kind of got into it then, and that was a few years ago, but having that groundwork I think really has helped me every time I've had to go back to Leia again, at various stages of her life. So I always kind of revisit some of that research that I did. Watching clips is always, because that what everyone's expecting from Carrie Fisher, her performance, and then what they're expecting from the audiobooks, and so that kind of past research definitely has laid a good groundwork when I do come back to it. So I just kind of did a lot of looking back at that, and even just basically reading this book, she did such a good job with both Han and Leia. You feel those characters so strongly straight away, so that kind of helps just dig up all the oh yeah, this is how they bicker, this is how they speak, this is how Leia thinks, and that sort of just embodying that. You hope it comes out of your mouth, and I think it did. Kind of just got to feel it in your body, and then I hope it translates. So that's kind of my process. I'm more of a I do the work, and then I kind of hope that having it all in there and feeling it all comes out. I'm not a huge prepper on the page. I don't do a lot of writing on my page or marking up or any of that stuff. It's more just having that character in your mind and knowing who they are and trusting that your instincts will let them out.
I think you can safely say that they did. Mark, how about you?
Yeah, pretty similar process. Anytime I get to do any of the legacy characters, I try to rewatch some of the films that they're featured in, and because you have to, so it's I have to research. Yes, so so it's an excuse to rewatch it. But I try to if I'm walking the dog or kind of walking down the street, I'll maybe just listen to clips of it in the background just to try to really saturate it in there, and then I try to kind of get their cadences or get their rhythms and kind of really try to lock in to what they'll be saying, because what is interesting with the books is in the films, they obviously you get to know them, but they talk so much less than they will be talking in the book. So it's even if there's certain things that they might say that are similar to the films, oftentimes you're exploring scenes with these characters that or types of scenes that maybe aren't necessarily explored in the films or different or deeper. And so then you have to that's where you really have to kind of figure out, well, what's your interpretation and what would you how do you think they would do? So I just try to kind of get that foundation there, and then kind of if the foundation's strong, I'll feel more confident about branching out into areas that maybe are new or fresh or so yeah. And then it's just my Saskia, I don't know how you do it, but it's probably similar. But I just anytime someone's speaking in the book, I'll just try to jot down a few lines of their dialogue and any descriptions of the character that the author is giving me or just different things. And then I go back and I try to figure out I cast it in my mind. If this were a film, what would these characters sound like, and I'll record little samples on my phone. And then when I get in the booth, I'll just play like a quick little sample before that character has to speak to try to lock me in. And then usually like around like day 2 or day 3, I've gotten to spend enough time with them that I don't need to keep referring back to the phone. But at first I just kind of use that to kind of get me locked in and refer back to.
Saskia, is that at all similar to part of your process?
Yeah. I don't record them and listen back to them, but that's a good idea. I'm more just like kind of like get the, have it all sort of cast in my head. And then like, I have a pretty good ear for, keeping things consistent, but also it's nice on these. You got Kevin there to be like, what are you doing? That doesn't sound right. Or that doesn't sound the same. Also like, yeah, like it's great with these because there are so many, references you can get. Like there's so many times where I'll be prepping and I'm like, a character pops up and I'm like, is that a character that exists already?
Yeah,
I hope so, because then I have my work done for me.
Right.
But it's also fun when you get very occasionally you get someone that you're like, this, minor character that says a line or two doesn't exist. I can just go wild and come up with my own thing. But yes, so similar process.
Saskia, do you know about Wikipedia?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I found it on all my deep dives.
Yeah.
It's very helpful.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to stop there and we will pick up the rest of the conversation tomorrow. For now, that is going to do it for this episode of the podcast. And it just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining me for it as always. And may the force be with you wherever in the world you may be.
7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited, or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the force be with them. All original content is copyright 2021 by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.